Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the third annual Smart Connect Summit. My name is Robert Nieminen, and I'm the Chief Content Director of Smart Buildings Technology, and I have the privilege of serving as moderator for several of today's sessions, including this morning's keynote presentation. We're very excited to have you join us as we have a great day of content lined up for you, and we appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedules to hear more about integrating the ecosystem of smart buildings and elevating the built environment through new technologies and thoughtful design solutions. This morning's opening keynote, titled Navigating the Landscape of Smart Building Developments and Tech-Ready Buildings, will begin in just a few moments. But before we kick things off, I'd like to extend our gratitude to our partners who have made this event possible and free to attend for all of you. So a big thank you to our sponsors, Panduit, Train, ABB, and Dormakaba for their support. Now, before we get started, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. To begin, let me explain how you can participate in today's presentation. Firstly, if you have any technical difficulties during the session, please drop a comment explaining your issue in the questions window, and one of our technical experts will be able to assist you. We do recommend disabling any pop-up blocking software or extensions in your browser, as these can cause issues with the webinar player. Additionally, we welcome your questions during this event, and we'll answer as many questions as possible during the Q&A session that will follow this keynote presentation. But feel free to send in your questions at any time. And to do so, just type your questions into the Ask a Question window on the side of your screen and submit the button. Please be aware that today's session is being recorded and you'll be notified by email when the archive is available. And lastly, at the end of each session, there is a screen that will pop up asking you to fill out a quick survey. Please take a moment to fill out this brief survey, which will help provide guidance to us on future content that we plan to provide. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker for this morning's opening presentation. Steve Yapsuga is the founder of WorkforceG. Steve is a highly respected and sought-after professional business and market strategist, and he has over 25 years of experience serving as a catalyst in infrastructure technologies. He serves as the co-chairman of the board for NEDAS, formerly Northeast DAS and Small Cell Association, a 15-plus-year board member of the Maryland DC Wireless Association, BOMA, and Wireless Infrastructure Association, WIA, a professional ecosystem, workforce development, 5G, and infrastructure stakeholder. And with that, I'll turn things over to you, Steve.
Thank you so much, Robert. And I also, before I getting started, want to thank Robert Nieminen. I've known Robert for almost a year now, and it's been an absolute pleasure working with him and his professional team. So glad to be doing this live as well. I've got my coffee, I've got my water, all set up, and it's wonderful to be able to have a live event like this. Before I delve into the heart of today's discourse, I'd like to take a moment as well to express my sincerest gratitude towards the partners and the sponsors. Your commitment really are the cornerstone for this success. Your vision and dedication is bringing us all together for the innovation for smart buildings technology. And lastly, I want to acknowledge and thank the virtual audience. It's awesome to see such a great response and your presence, really turning this digital gathering into a vibrant hub of shared knowledge and passion. So this impressive level of interest and sheer number of guests today really highlights the significance of what we're doing today. And it also further impacts the smart building technologies community. To each of you attending, your engagement is truly appreciated. We're all curious of the growing technology needs for our communities, our workforce, and our economy. And together, we're not just participants, we're active contributors to a more connected and sustainable future. So thank you again for having me. Thank you again, Smart Buildings Technology, Smart Connect Summit, and away we go. So for starters, the changing face of today's economy is here. And last week, the Federal Reserve Chairman announced another pause on federal interest rates of 5.25 to 5.5%, with hints of potential spikes next year, which is already currently at a 22-year high. The stage has been set. These longer-term rates had pushed Freddie Mac mortgage rates to 7.76 on a 30-year fixed and 7% on a 15-year fixed. Macroeconomic pressure has also contributed to the volatility outlook. The geopolitical issue with Ukraine and Russia has driven energy prices. There's been monetary policy tightening by most major central banks. So if we're going to follow key economic factors, we really want to be able to get a greater lens on what the trends are. So we're going to dive into some key economic factors today. When measuring GDP, the primary drivers here are personal consumption, business investment, government spending, and exports minus imports. So similar to the 2008 housing market crisis, the GDP took a significant dip during the COVID pandemic in 2020, followed by a correction, then a rebalancing. You can see these inflection points over a 20-year period, and you can see the trends. This year's quarterly GDP look-in was at 2.4 in Q2 and 4.9 in Q3. I can tell you from personal experience, and certainly I think throughout this audience, that we've all experienced some type of impact on inflation, whether it's the price of eggs, coffee, and just about everyday items have all increased. You take a trip to Costco or Sam's Club, and you're spending hundreds of dollars more than you did before. Construction costs, they've gone up. Material prices have gone up. The household projects that you had scheduled with contractors in the past are all significantly more expensive. So if you follow the Consumer Price Index, you will have seen last year's inflation rate was 8%. To put this in perspective, and the year before was also extremely high. So in putting this in perspective, if you go back 100 years and take into an account a 5-year consecutive span, the US has experienced the highest consecutive year-over-year CPI since the span of 1976 through 1981. This feeling of economic impact has been traumatic. It's been traumatic to most Americans, in particular the middle class. And since COVID, there's been a dynamic pivot with a traditional view of the workforce. For example, in 2019, 12% of the UK's workforce was remote. Today, it's over 40%. During the pandemic, the remote workforce here in the US domestically hit over 44%. In a study just completed 2 weeks ago, 77% of the Fortune 100 now operates on a hybrid-based work schedule, 32% of which reduced their office footprint. Last month, Dropbox paid $79 million to give up 165,000 square feet of office space in San Francisco. Meta paid 149 million pounds to break its lease on a major London development. Companies like Uber, United Healthcare, Electronic Arts, Kickstarter, Home Depot, Salesforce, Walgreens, JP Morgan, they've all reduced their office footprints since 2020. And 13% of the Fortune 100 are not requiring any office visits per week. The corporate work from home and hybrid approaches have been the new expectation in business markets worldwide. So let's review. We're gonna have a little game here, and I'm not sure if you've seen this before, but 2x3, 50-50, 90-10 kind of sounds like a bingo card. Bring your own, flex time, cohorts, office first, optional, partial, remote first, shift work week by week. How many folks, I'm curious out of the audience, please feel free to respond in the notes. Just respond if you have a work from home policy. I would be curious to see what those numbers look like. So there's a fact that a number of these Fortune 100 companies, because it's been so prevalent, they've coined their own work from home taglines. So some new marketing slogans, it certainly sounds like a marketing campaign. 3M, work your way, American Express, Amex Flex, Disney, 4x1, KPMG's Flex with Purpose, and General Motors, work appropriately. Apple, JP Morgan, Chase, Google, Wells Fargo, Lenovo, Nike, they all currently use a 3x2 hybrid model. And this model is led by an executive team. So employees are expected to come into the office for 3 days a week, then work remotely for 2 days a week. And there's some inherent benefits with this. Part of this is you have a close to even mix between the remote and the in-person. This scheduling is much simpler. It's just management for team leaders, and there's a clear lines of expectations for all employees. So there isn't any gray area. The side effects, I guess the downsides for this is that the schedule is not tailored for certain employees. For example, some of these disadvantages, if you're an ops manager or an engineer, perhaps you need to have that face time on a regular basis, and that might not be the case. So big swings could be in the office from an attendance standpoint on any given day. That also requires more office space than what might be initially planned, and that could create more problems. This turn in both the hybrid and the work from home policies and employee preference, we've also seen a huge spike in the domestic migration. Americans are moving out of the city to save on rent and lower their total overhead costs. In just 2 years, over 2 million people migrated from large urban dense cities. Last year, over 861,000 people moved into the suburban markets last year. And this is rather interesting. It doesn't even include those friends of ours that maybe moved to Portugal or Prague maybe after the COVID pandemic and working at a remote location in a different part of the world. But that certainly has become prevalent. At the same time, some of the largest corporations had massive layoffs over the past 3 years. According to Forbes, nearly 600,000 US employees lost their jobs in 2023. This included highlighted jobs in tech, banking, media, and manufacturing. This is a 198% increase from last year and second worst since the 2009 recession. A domino effect has really been created because of this, and the commercial real estate marketplace with many large and mid-cap businesses have been faltering during the COVID pandemic. And despite PPP loans and loan relief, tenant delinquencies have increased. For example, last month in October, the commercial real estate delinquency rates were at 4.63%. But my presentation is not all about doom and gloom, and pivots have occurred to counter these trends. Office space construction was down intentionally 27% over the 5-year average. A thinning construction pipeline will actually reduce the supply side risk and result in a shortage of prime time office space over the long run. It's simple supply and demand. At the same point in time, CBRE recently shared that they are exceeding their annual 2023 projections of leasing volume at a rate of 744 million square feet. Meta cut an additional 11,000 jobs this past month to make it over 20,000 total cuts this year. And this has been a lessening of 25% of their workforce. They coined it as the year of efficiency. Meta does plan to rehire in 2024. We don't know what those numbers are yet at this point. But Google, Microsoft, and Amazon laid off more than 50,000 workers in the past 3 months. There's been over 1,700 layoffs with over approximately 400,000 people impacted. So this all sounds counterintuitive, that I'm talking about it's no longer doom and gloom, but I like to look at this as an analogy of a controlled burn in a protected forest. These layoffs are going to open many opportunities for much smaller firms to add talent, which are normally difficult to find, which in turn are going to help innovate at a much faster pace than these larger corporations. In addition, many will find new roles quickly or start new businesses. In fact, as a recent study, 80% of the laid off workers had found new roles within 90 days of their job search. And according to a recent Tech.com survey, 24.1% of those laid off are going to start their own companies. According to Goldman Sachs, 50% of American workforce is employed by small business, which is defined as anywhere between $1 million to $40 million in revenues with an employment of 100 to 1,500 employees. Like the tide, the economy is going to eventually rebound back. According to a recent study by CBRE, strong predictions for a recovery in both investment volume and the stabilization of cap rates are expected by the end of the second quarter next year. Outlined in JP Morgan Commercial's real estate outlook for 2023, they highlighted that property owners and investors with strong balance sheets can understand how to take advantage of these over-leveraged building owners, and they are going to capitalize and grow their portfolio at a much lower discounted cost. Some of the key areas that we can look for right now today are mixed income, industrial, and multifamily. They all have very strong outlooks. The rise of e-commerce, continued demand for co-working space continues to grow. And this continuous shift towards urbanization through technology and mixed-use development. With all this together, it's safe to say that expense mitigation is a top priority. Right now, the pursuit of a single anchor tenant or winning the Amazon lotteries are long gone. The growing demand for an integrated technology experience targeting the growth of small to mid-cap business is here today. So the focus of energy and efficiency and sustainability is prevalent. And this is where we want to talk about some of the focus of these smaller businesses. And this is where some of the opportunity and the trend has grown. Small cap business is defined as a company with a market capitalization between $100 million and $2 billion. Currently, there's approximately 1,500 small cap stocks. A mid-cap company is a company between $2 to $10 billion, and there's currently over 1,000 mid-cap stocks with a total market of $5 trillion. So, part of this is looking at what some of the key impacts are going to be for today's tenants. The need for best-in-class internet and cellular connectivity for laptops, high-end workspaces, large screens, community spaces, the demand for smart security and surveillance, and AI-enabled detections. In addition, we have to look at environmentally conscious building features. This not only helps our planet, but it also helps save a tremendous amount for the building owners themselves. And this is the utilization of smart utilities. So if we take a look at the old model at the top, I know that I'm one of those people that had worked in one of these buildings many years ago. But back then, there was an emphasis on the physical attributes, the location, the size, the amenities, and that's changed. That's changed. The new model is the integration of smart technologies as a standard and what that might look like today. And this continues to grow. So I'm going to have a couple of examples here. The first one on the left, this one is the Brookfield Properties. And Brookfield Properties had created this One Manhattan West. It's off of 9th Avenue. And this is a gold LEED certified 2023 Well Health Safety and Energy Star Award at over 8 million square feet. This offers state-of-the-art bespoke office spaces. It has green space, residential space. It also offers full 5G and Wi-Fi 6 connectivity. Their quote is live, stay, and work. It's a 62-story residential tower with 6 million square feet of office space and 134 rooms in a luxury hotel. This is all powered by 100% renewable energy. It will achieve net zero emissions by 2050 or sooner. It also provides digital dashboards with real-time energy consumption for all tenants and 60 EV charging stations with a smart garage. The photo in the middle is 6th and Guadalupe. This is in Austin by Gensler. And this is the latest of a flurry of skyscrapers that's being constructed in Austin. The tower itself is currently the tallest in the city. It'll change in about a year. It's 66 stories with 2 industrial glass and steel volumes placed at the top of the podium. It has 2.2 million square feet with 590,000 square feet of office space and over 345 apartment units. Originally, all of the office space was leased by Meta, but that has pivoted. So it looks like that's going to be parsed out by much smaller companies. Lastly, on the right is MVRDV's The Canyon in San Francisco. This is located in the heart of Mission Rock. It opened in June of last year. And this was once a parking lot, and it has changed significantly. It was transformed into a 23-story, 2 million square foot LEED Gold certified mixed residential and office for connected waterfront and living and working. The carbon-free focus includes 100% recycling and treatment of wastewater. It also offers climate-approved planting for sea level defense and resiliency. It also offers an underground DES, which is a district energy system, and this is for efficient central plant heating and cooling. MVRDV continues to focus on connecting cities in mixed use through high rises throughout the entire world. So now we look at the smart building feature sets, and smart buildings are really an extension of a smart city. And there's been tremendous technology advancements since the original Smart City Challenge back in 2015. At the time, the Smart City Challenge had 77 applicants in various cities of those that were under 750,000 residents in that given area. And that was really the catalyst for much of what's happened today in smart cities advancement today, because back then the focus was to help avoid and address food deserts and helping bridge technology for telemedicine and helping improve jobs in the city. And since that it's occurred, I mean, just to kind of put things in perspective, at the time, the wireless at the time was 802.11n, and the standard for supporting peak rates at that time was right around 100 megabits per second. When Wi-Fi 7 becomes standardized next year, it's going to deliver rates of 40 gigabits per second. IoT back in 2015 was looked at as kind of a device to connect with everyday devices. And whether it be a smart refrigerator or a smart TV, today there are more than 43 billion devices connected to the internet. At the time, we had 4G and LTE, and now 5G is prevalent, and 6G is looked at as a very early adoption and under the testing phases. That probably won't be ready for a few years from now. A big key for smart buildings is sensors. And the role of the Internet of Things is building transformation. So this goes into a number of key components, including your smart lighting technology, your HVAC systems, which will have smart thermostats and sensors. These can help optimize heating and cooling, and energy monitoring. Energy monitoring is big. That slide that I had prior with the drab building, one of the big problems with older buildings is that they're both heating and cooling at the same time. And smart buildings today, they avoid that issue with the utilization of smart thermostats and sensors that optimizes both your heating and your cooling, but also helps monitor it from an operational standpoint. The other side is energy monitoring. Smart surveillance is also key. Surveillance has been around for a very long time, but what hasn't happened is the utilization of AI algorithms. this is going to be a game changer. As in the past, when IP surveillance was highly utilized and transformed in the 2010s, the utilization was predicated upon the user of having to create certain standards within the software for motion detection and object leave behind. Today, with AI algorithms, facial recognition and asset tracking and detecting unusual activities, all these are fully capable and they're automated, which makes a huge difference. Access control. When we look at access control today, it's changed dramatically since 2015 as well. The utilization of IoT-enabled badges, the integration with smartphones, the integration with biometric systems. Buildings can now control and monitor who enters certain areas. They also improve security. And this gives much bigger peace of mind. Occupancy and space utilization, the utilization of space sensors and occupancy sensors. As mentioned before with the work from home, there's the variances of who's going to be in the office and who's not. Well, the utilization of occupancy sensors helps address those issues and keeping your building more efficient. The predictive maintenance of equipment. This is another big part that's being utilized today. Service companies today have technology that can help with building maintenance and building service to identify when there's trends, when it needs to get changed, many times before the building owner is even aware of it. This also improves the monitorization of leak detection, integrated dashboards, energy usage for security systems, and alerts. Digital dashboards and smart signs are going to continue to grow, especially for the in-building market. This allows critical communications when there could be an active shooter or a fire. So looking at the role of technology infrastructure, the role of wireless and cellular technology is absolutely pivotal, especially with addressing older buildings. And I want to really stress this because, looking at this challenge with older buildings is you're running into the conundrum of, do we knock a building down and spend, tens and hundreds of millions of dollars more to be able to create something from scratch? Or are there ways to be able to combat an existing building that has good bones, so to speak, and has many more years of stability? So I like to look at this as the analogy of integrating Apple CarPlay with a used car or truck. This enables, with 5G and Wi-Fi 6, you can have a key differentiator for that structure and be able to have great utilization and great intelligence inside the building with having strong capabilities of 5G or Wi-Fi 6. So comparing the two, I want to discuss both Wi-Fi and looking at the technologies of Wi-Fi and the technologies of 5G systems. So before I jump in though, I know some of you who are highly technical may be aware that Wi-Fi 7 is here. It's certainly being talked about. Wi-Fi 7 is also known as 802.11be, also referred to as EHT, which is extremely high throughput. It's available in the market, but it has not been standardized. And that's why you'll see a Wi-Fi standardization for Wi-Fi 6. And this is important to know. Wi-Fi 7 will be available sometime in 2014. The date is not yet determined, but there's talk about perhaps maybe Q1 or Q2. But if we look at some of the big comparisons between 5G and Wi-Fi 6, Wi-Fi 6, it operates on 2.4 and 5 gigahertz. It increased data transfer speeds. It has improved capacity, better efficiency, and lower latency. 5G stands for next generation. It's all cellular network technology. It's all designed for mobile communications. It operates on a wide range of frequencies, both low, mid, and high frequency ranges. Wi-Fi 6, if we're looking at the comparison of speed and capacity, Wi-Fi 6 offers speeds currently of 9.6 gigabits per second. And it employs a technology called OFDMA. And it also utilizes multi-user MIMO, which is, it handles multiple devices simultaneously, and it also enhances overall network capacity. 5G is much faster than Wi-Fi 6 because it reaches peak speeds of 20 gigabits per second. That's why 5G edges Wi-Fi. And you'll see NFL stadiums, for example, they're being built around 5G systems. And the ability to be able to handle massive crowds is an advantage for the utilization of 5G. When we look at coverage and range, Wi-Fi 6 is best suited for indoor coverage. It's especially great with inside buildings. The challenge is that it has degradation when you've got walls and lead glass and other obstructions. The difference with Wi-Fi 6 and 5G, though, is that 5G offers better coverage because it has the ability to penetrate through walls and other obstacles. And that's why it's much more imperative to utilize 5G within the system. A combination of both is definitely the best practice for both. Prior to implementing 5G, I highly recommend that you reach out and work with an RF consultant with the design and the testing. For interference, we'll talk about deployment first. Wi-Fi 6 gets the edge because it's much easier to deploy. It's much easier to set up a Wi-Fi network, which may require just new access points with your existing infrastructure and ensuring that you have compatible Wi-Fi 6 access points. This is also going to help down the road as Wi-Fi 7 becomes adaptive, because Wi-Fi 7 and 6G are both going to be backwards compatible. 5G takes more of an installation with base station antennas. They're much larger, it's more complex, and developing that network takes Wi-Fi or takes RF professionals and heat mapping capability. So it does take a little bit more attention to be able to help develop an effective 5G network. Lastly, we'll talk about interference and congestion. And currently 5G takes the nod because it operates in licensed frequency bands. This is a big advantage because it does reduce the likelihood of interference. There are other cellular technologies such as your light license capabilities, and those are prevalent in certain community colleges and other applications, but typically 5G is more prevalent in those areas. Wi-Fi 6 has to operate in the unlicensed frequency bands. So as for interference, it's more susceptible. And in dense urban areas with lots of traffic, there's more capabilities of having congestion in those areas as well. So let's look at the foundations of the workforce. As we move into this area, I want to show you a quick example. So in the upper right-hand corner is the Regis. This is a Regis co-working space in Midtown in Atlanta. This used to be a very boring mid-century office building, but after a makeover with lots of glass, Wi-Fi 6 and 5G connectivity for both Verizon and AT&T, this turned into a very successful endeavor. The latest co-working space supports more than 3,000 people in their Atlanta locations. In the middle, we see data centers, and this is continuing to trend upwards in a very aggressive manner. The supporting of data centers in commercial real estate really involves a high combination of strategic planning, efficient operations, and effective maintenance. I'm going to outline a few best practices for data centers. So the first is adopt preventative maintenance. this is key, and I had mentioned this prior, but you have to ensure that you have proactive maintenance to be advocated and implemented. So invest in facilities management technology. The latest technology can help streamline these operations and improve efficiency. Second is create an asset management program. This can aid in the planning and investment and ensuring that resources are allocated. Standardize your practices and procedures. Have a clear set of guidelines. Train your staff with a standard operating procedure. Next, which is important, is monitoring and report usage of utilities. Utilities are huge with supporting data centers. So it's absolutely essential that you comply with environmental and regulatory requirements. Data centers must adhere to the strictest environmental standards. And lastly, we need to implement renewable energy sources. With the high energy consumption of data centers, we have to use renewable energy sources like wind, energy, solar power. It's all increasingly important. So let's talk about some of the current challenges and opportunity. Right now, as we're reviewing, a big challenge today is cybersecurity threats. This is going to continue to evolve, and it's going to continue to grow. There's been studies shown that there's not enough cybersecurity professionals in the market today, and that is a growing concern. This is definitely going to be a major issue in terms of smart building technology. AI-enabled fraud, now that AI is extremely prevalent, IoT attacks, the increase in remote workers not typically having as strong of security capabilities. So all those threats need to be addressed. As an opportunity, one of the latest trends is some of the government funding, and most recently, which was earlier this year, which was the BEAD program, the Broadband Equity Access Deployment Program. And if we look at following the money here, this is definitely an opportunity for growth, and especially in the rural areas. The BEAD program had rolled out earlier this year, and with a purpose to expand infrastructure in the rural areas. It's going to hit all 50 states, and 19 states already are receiving more than $1 billion in funding. So what does this mean to us? This means that there's going to be an extension of these services to multi-tenant buildings. This is going to help the growth and the ongoing capability for smart infrastructure and smart buildings. In closing, I'd have to say that there's a lot of movement happening today, and it's absolutely essential to be able to continue to stay the course with increasing your technology infrastructure inside of buildings. It does create a competitive advantage. As we've seen, there's been many different projections, and in some cases, a tough outlook with years ahead. However, as the dynamics have changed from large business to small and mid cap, more opportunities are opening. And this also opens a lot more doors for those companies that are able to capitalize on this. So I want to thank you. I want to thank you for your time and the opportunity to speak to all of you today. And I guess I'm open for any questions.
Well, great. Thanks so much for that informative presentation, Steve. And with that, we will move into our Q&A portion of the presentation. A few of you have already submitted some questions, so we're going to jump into those. But right now, for our audience, if you'd like to submit a question to Steve, type your question into the question window on the side of your screen now and hit the submit button. Looks like we have time for several questions, so I urge you to post those for this discussion. So Steve, one of the early questions that came in while you were talking about 5G and 6G, is Wi-Fi necessary with 6G technology?
Yeah. So is Wi-Fi technology? Let me just make sure I got the question. Is Wi-Fi necessary with 6G? So it's backwards compatible. So when you look at Wi-Fi with Wi-Fi and your Wi-Fi networks itself is backwards compatible. If you're looking at 5G systems, so 6G is not here yet. I think that's the important thing. So we have to address that, what's actually here. And some of the problems is that you might hear marketing, for example, with Wi-Fi 7. Wi-Fi 7 hasn't been standardized yet. It's available now. There's devices that support Wi-Fi 7, and they're going to be advertised as such. But it's really critical that you don't dive into that because it's not standardized and it's not supported by the Wi-Fi Alliance. So if those that are looking to procure Wi-Fi 7 ready devices, these are just infants. They're in their infantile stages, and they haven't been properly vetted out. So that's very important to look at. And I think I'm going to read into the question a little bit. Is Wi-Fi necessary for 5G? Absolutely. They absolutely go hand in hand. It's looking at it as both are needed for each other. So I like to look at the cellular connectivity, for example, with public safety systems. In public safety bands, typically running in a ultra low frequency, such as 450 to 512 megahertz, or a 700 or 800 band, they're all running at different frequencies. The goal for public safety communications is to ensure that there's critical communications and availability for two-way communications at a moment of truth in all the difficult to reach areas, such as stairwells or elevator shafts, or hard to find areas inside of a building, because at the moment of truth, if something does happen, people are able to communicate effectively with emergency responders. That's a great example. On the other side, with Wi-Fi enabled communications, whether it's going to be Wi-Fi 6 or down the road if it's going to be Wi-Fi 7, those go hand in hand because they're in the common areas of being able to utilize Wi-Fi 6 or your Wi-Fi, future Wi-Fi 7. They're both going to go hand in hand. And there's something called a handoff. So handoffs will happen with your phone. So if you've got your phone and you're making a call, sometimes you might be inside of a building. It can hand off from your wireless side, so your 802.11 AC, or it could be moving into your 5G network. And the networks themselves are able to help trade that off. So it is extremely beneficial to be able to have both a Wi-Fi, a smart Wi-Fi, and a 5G network.
For sure. Great. Another question here for you, Steve. What do you think about using GPON on building instead of typical Ethernet configurations?
Yeah. So when you're looking at GPON, it's you've got kind of a dynamic with both sides. Ethernet and fiber connectivity is a huge help. So think of the household that has Ethernet connectivity throughout the house. You plug in where you're at, you're able to jump right in. You don't have that disruption. Sometimes you've got some difficult areas inside the house. Well, when you're looking at inside of a building, having high Ethernet capability is similar to be able to have the analogy of a high-end multi-strand fiber network inside of the building. You absolutely need to be able to have future strands to be able to help build out inside of the network and inside the building. So I would say that it's part of the future-proof considerations. Looking at the advantages and disadvantages, I would say that I'm bullish on being able to have a strong fiber-based network, and that's really what I would want users to be able to accentuate, just because of the capability that there's a lot more future growth expansion capabilities.
Yeah. Okay, great. Looks like somebody that joined us late asked if you had explained the difference between 5G on a home router and 5G on a cellular network. Can you address that, Steve?
Sure. So when you're looking at 5G on a home router, well, that might be tied in. I'm going to read into the question because maybe they're looking at a home router is typically a router versus a repeater. So a repeater system is very different from a router. It's repeating a signal. It's amplifying a signal. So with a home router, if this person is Dayton Warner is mentioning 5G, they're typically looking at the cellular connectivity for a home. Cellular connectivity at a home, a lot of times people are going to Best Buy or Lowe's for an off-the-shelf repeater system. And that has different standards in comparison to a bidirectional amplifier, or a BDA, or a distributed antenna system, which is called a DAS. And both are entirely different in terms of what your home may have. So if they're referring to a 5G router, I think they're probably referring to a 5G repeater. So if it's a 5G repeater, it's simply amplifying that signal, but it's not a smart device, so to speak. All it's doing is it's amplifying whatever that weak signal is to have a stronger signal. Inside of a building, a bidirectional amplifier has service antennas throughout the building, and they're strategically placed. And that's ensuring that you have a very strong heat map throughout the building and full connectivity. So that would be kind of the key differences between the two.
Great. Okay. Thanks for that, Steve. Next question. What global system integrators are best positioned for smart city deployments?
So what global system integrators? You want me to pick my favorites, right? So, just like children, all are my favorites. But I would say that in looking at kind of best practices, what I would recommend to Mr. Wilcox is that what he looks at is find out what they've done in the past. Find out what their history has been. I would definitely do a deep dive in vetting of that particular company. Sometimes just because a company is global or if they're nationwide doesn't mean that they may have the deepest expertise for that particular region. So, for example, there are different jurisdiction codes for inside certain states. For example, for the public safety bans, because all buildings do require public safety communications for emergency responders, there's over 4,000 jurisdictions in the United States. And each of those 4,000 jurisdictions have different nuances of one particular value or another of what their requirements are. So case in point, if you're looking at a jurisdiction in Washington, D.C., their requirements require 24-hour battery backup solution and a 99% full coverage throughout the building, including stairwells and elevator shafts. If you're looking at Des Moines, Iowa, for example, you're not going to have a 24-hour battery backup. You're going to have a 12-hour battery backup requirement, and it's a 95% coverage. So that's just kind of a small snapshot of some of that nuanced area. So it's imperative that whoever you choose, that you're ensuring that they've got the expertise for that particular area, and they have deep knowledge embedded for that specific area. Sure.
Okay, great. Questions keep coming. This is great to the audience. Keep posing those questions. We still have like another 10 minutes here, but I'll move on to the next one. So Steve, is PoE and PoE++ the reason justification for wired solutions in commercial buildings?
PoE and PoE+, the reason justification. I'm not sure if I understand the question correctly, so apologies. But if we're looking at PoE, power over Ethernet devices, you have to have, it's kind of like working, it's kind of a chain link. The weakest link is going to be the one that you have to address the most. So inside of a building, I would look at it from the same side. What are your goals for the building? What are your objectives that you're trying to reach to make it a smart building? One smart building in Baltimore might be entirely different from a smart building in Miami or in Miami-Dade County. Some of those needs have changed. I mean, back in 2015, when I was reviewing the smart city applications, each of the applications were 35 pages each. They were all concise. But what was really dynamic is that each one of their needs was very different. Those 75 or 77 cities, they're all different in what their needs are. And that's very much like today. The need today, people today with smart buildings, they want to be able to have enabled IoT devices. There's 40 billion of them being used today. They want to be able to utilize an semblance of AI technology. But one building that might hold 50 tenants might be entirely different from a building that holds 3,000. And what their needs are in terms of the landscape of that work, live, and play. I think that's really a big trend that we have to kind of look at a lot more. And how is that addressing the needs of the user? I was mentioning that analogy of the Apple CarPlay, and it's very much prevalent today. Older buildings can definitely take advantage of becoming smarter quicker by having the wired and wireless infrastructure. It's a much better cost-efficient play rather than having to completely destroy a building. And there's efficiencies that can be realized. Some simple reconstruction and redevelopment of that facility in that building can certainly be repurposed to the greater good.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know we talked about that earlier in our session, Steve, prior to the the opportunity that's available here with the existing building stock. Just presents such a tremendous opportunity to upgrade buildings. But we'll continue on here. We have more questions. So the next one is, Asia currently dominates smart building projects / deployment. Where do you see the strongest trends in actual smart building deployments in the West?
Well, Asia definitely has a lot going on. India, there's a number of new developments that are happening today. But you know what? I'm going to actually reverse kind of the question, because it's a lot easier. And we actually talked about this a little bit earlier as well. It's much easier to be able to start from scratch at a brand new building and construct it just like a new home. And some of the technologies that are being utilized today with some of the utilities and going underground and being able to have more efficient utilities is certainly a great practice. But I would be more keen on taking a deeper dive on some of these other tech buildings, such as the ones in Atlanta that I outlined. It's a lot more difficult and more creative for existing buildings to become smart versus a brand new skyscraper starting from scratch. So there's an awful lot in Shanghai that's continuing to develop. India, for a long period of time, was widely considered the fastest growing smart cities community in the world. So I haven't had a chance to check today, because it's a kind of a contest that's constantly kind of moving back and forth. And it's very much like a stock ticker. You kind of look at the hot hand, and then you wait a couple of months, and then there's a new city. Very much like looking at technology today with Wi-Fi 6 and 5G. Wait next year, and those check marks that I had before are going to change, because looking at what Wi-Fi 7 is going to be able to do, it's pretty incredible. I mean, if we look at Wi-Fi 5, so this is back in 2015, Wi-Fi 5 was 6.9 gigabits per second, Wi-Fi 6 9.6, Wi-Fi 7 40 gigabits per second. I mean, let that sink in. The same thing for 6G. When 6G becomes available, it was tested in a lab recently in China. And although it's not going to be coming out anytime soon, it's going to be 50 to 100 times faster than 5G. They had a testing speed of 206 gigabits per second. 206. I mean, let that sink in. You think about the stadium experience or the office experience. Now think about that inside of a building, and that's a power play, back to the building again, because I think people have the knee buckle reaction of what's happening with the work from home and everybody's going to stay at home. And yes, it's a trend. And I think that it's a good trend to see, because it opens up a lot more opportunity. It also opens up a lot more technology doors. Collaboration is absolutely key. People have Zoom burnout. I'm enjoying my coffee here and having a great conversation with everyone. But at the same point in time, I always look forward to going into the office, and that makes a huge difference. And with these new technologies on the precipice right now, it's something to really be excited about.
For sure. Yeah. Great comment, Steve. So we got about 5 minutes left here. A few more questions as well in the queue. Next one is, what's the future of Barnett? And also a comment here. Great. Thank you. Great session. We appreciate the feedback, Mark. So Steve, can you talk about the future of Barnett?
Well, I'd like to know a little bit more about what the reference is. And thank you for the comments, Mr. Wilcox. I do appreciate that. I would like to know a little bit more specifics on maybe what that might be referencing with Barnett.
Right, so maybe we could circle back to that one.
Yeah.
Mark, if you want to pose a follow-up question there, and we'll move on to the next question. Maybe we'll come back to that if we have time. So next question was, do you think FMP class 4 DC energy would substitute regular AC?
I'm sorry?
So the question was, do you think FMP class 4 DC energy would substitute regular AC?
Let's see. So if we're looking at AC FMP class, so is this more of an energy based query, and looking at the challenges of AC technology? Can you reframe the question?
Yeah. Okay. So we'll do that again. So Mark, to get back to you on the previous question, what's the future of BACnet? He said, sorry about that.
The future of BACnet.
Yep.
I'm gonna have to take a pass on that one. I'm not really sure.
Okay. All right, we'll definitely move on. The building protocol, HVAC elevator, et cetera, was his follow-up comment there too.
Okay.
But you want to pass on that still?
Yeah, sure. That's fine. We can exchange information, and I'm happy to talk to him offline.
Okay. All right. Yeah, we will do that. Okay. So next question, any thoughts / advantages to deploying low energy, long distance communications protocols such as LoRa, N-Ocean, Zigbee, et cetera? Maybe a combo of Wi-Fi and low power is an option.
Yeah, this is kind of cool. So, looking at the changes, the Bluetooth technology has changed quite a bit. And looking at that's a very good question, Jim. The Zigbee and LoRa, I am bullish on those protocols because it definitely opens up a lot more opportunity, especially that they are low energy. And that technology set has grown tremendously over the past 3 years. There's been such new growth with Bluetooth technology and the distances. So in the past, about 3 or 4 years ago with Bluetooth technology, you could only be maybe 10, 15 feet. Now the distances are significantly, doubled, tripled, quadrupled, where you can do so much more with those same technologies. What that enables you to do is the sensors and the live tracking. And there's a lot of great feature sets that could be utilized with that. I do see quite a bit being utilized with Zigbee and LoRa. I'm not sure about N-Ocean, but I definitely see a nice power play combination with utilizing Wi-Fi and the Bluetooth technology.
Okay,
good question.
Perfect. Great. Okay, we did have an earlier question. Somebody asked about getting a copy of the slides, which I think we'll definitely be able to do following the presentation. So we'll be in touch with you. I think it was Joe. And I think that about does it for our time. For those who submitted questions we didn't have time to answer, Steve will be getting back to you via email. We'll make sure to get those questions over to him. I'd like to thank Steve Yapsuga once again for sharing his insights with us, and of course, all of you for joining. Again, please fill out the brief survey that will pop up once this session concludes. We appreciate you filling it out, as again, it will help us with guidance on future content that we plan. So don't miss our next session coming up right here at the top of the hour, titled Advancing the Future, the Development of Fault-Managed Power and Its Influence on the Evolution of Smart Buildings, beginning right here at 11 o'clock Eastern. You can join the session by exiting out of this event and going back to the agenda. So this concludes our keynote presentation. Thank you for joining us for Smart Connect. Let's continue this information-packed day of learning with our next session. We'll see you shortly.